following video is reposted on all my social media channels as a public service and in defiance of big tech, deep state censorship. You can do your part to defeat the Orwellian Nazi cabal by sharing and reposting this video on your channel.
It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought us to the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the powerful Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all of the people. A great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we are able to reason, we're able to talk to each other, we're able to listen to each other, and we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. Welcome back to Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense, and today we have a really very special guest. You know him, Dave Rubin. You know him for a lot of reasons. He's got a great book out, Don't Burn This Book, which is a very provocative cover. And I think when you read it, you're going to figure out why it has that name. It's I think it's a must read for anybody on either side. It's going to open your mind. And he has just about the most popular podcast out there, which is filled with very much the same ideas and his observations on things. And I think it's going to turn out to be one of our most fascinating interviews from the time that I spent with him on the radio because of his point of view. Dave, thank you very, very much for being with us.
It's good to be with you again, Mr. Mayor.
So Dave, so let's get to where we are right now and then go into how you got there. It seems to me that these riots that we're going through now, having been through the riots of the 60s, the 70s, and a few in the 80s and early 90s. These are very different. They're much better organized. They clearly have a purpose. And then they move into really challenging the government, by taking over. They never took over police stations before. Mm-hmm. I never remember setting up an autonomous city. Is there something behind this more than just outrage?
Oh, yeah. There's something deeply dangerous behind it, deeply nefarious behind it, and we should explore that a little bit. First, I would say if people were protesting because there was a group of people based on the color of their skin or their gender or sexuality or religion or something like that were denied rights based on those immutable characteristics, I would be out in the streets with them. That is what you are supposed to do as an American. It is in the Bill of Rights that we are allowed to assemble and we are allowed to peaceably protest, although you probably saw Chris Cuomo on CNN saying, where does it say it has to be peaceful? Well, it happens to be in that Constitution thing. But if people were protesting unjust laws and that's it, well, then I know you would be out there with them doing the same thing. What's happening here and what sort of lays right beneath almost everything in the progressive set of ideas is that they really believe that the American experiment, and that's all that this country is for 200 plus years, an experiment of whether we could bring people from all over the world here to create something, the great melting pot that we've done so well, right? And you, as the former mayor of New York City, you probably know it better than anybody because
Right.
You had to be the mayor for everybody, regardless of where they came from. And you know what it's like. You get on a New York subway station, and it doesn't matter if you're getting on at the Upper West Side or downtown, you are going to see literally every person from every walk of life,
100%.
every skin color, gender, all of those things. The problem here with the progressives is that they believe that that very experiment is faulty, it's bad, it's evil, and they are trying to topple the system. And what's even more perverse about that is they've elected progressive mayors like de Blasio in New York and Garcetti here in LA and the mayor of Seattle, who believe that that they're allowed to autonomous zones burn down miles away from West Hollywood here in Los Angeles, which is, it's quite literally, it's the gayest place on earth. They've got rainbow flags in the crosswalk. It's 90% gay people probably that live in West Hollywood. I went there for a haircut last week. I'm probably could be arrested for that now. I shouldn't have said that. But I go to West Hollywood, and West Hollywood boarded up. Now we happen to be in June, which I'm told is Pride. And how does this all make sense that we're boarding up gay businesses in the name of tolerance that somehow is for Black Lives Matter? None of it makes sense. And this is what the left has brought upon us. They have a system of competing interests. We're for gay people, we're for Black people, we're for women. And actually, these things are very much at odds with each other. So thus, you can go into the gay community in tolerant West Hollywood and see that they have to border up their windows in the difference and diversity for Black Lives Matter. And that's being thrust upon America in almost every corner right now.
So in the old days when we used to have protests, the more normal protests, and I was involved either in the policing or prosecution of them, we'd always try to figure out who's really running this. There really was no such thing for more than about 3 hours to a spontaneous, peaceful protest. Because as soon as the protesters see it, it's a target of opportunity. Mm-hmm. So they move in, and then they try to figure out how much they can do with it. The job of the police is to find out, not to negotiate with the neighborhood guy who's really a legitimate guy who's protesting the beating of his son or protesting the shooting like we saw of Mr. Floyd. The job is to find the guy running it. And you negotiate with him. And then you can get some control over it. You get some ground rules. You can't use the whole city, have to stay on the block. You let them know when they're going to get arrested. You step over that line, it's not even a joke. You step over that line, you're arrested. Stay in the line, you're happy with you. Nowadays, we don't know who those people are. We're not allowed to investigate. The police have been driven out by First Amendment cases, so they have the foggiest idea who's doing it. The people who are doing it seem to be much more politically sophisticated. Used to be the Sharptons and the Jacksons. Mm-hmm. What did they want? They wanted to shake the businesses down later to make money. They were almost a form of mafia, gangster kind of thing. These people, you get the feeling, want our government. They want our government to fail. So we'll be part of something else. Maybe some world government, maybe some compliant government, what Europe does. I also get the sense, and correct me if I'm being unfair, this has a George Soros feeling to it.
Yeah, well, look, first off, we know that Open Society, which is funded by George Soros, is linked at some level with some of these Antifa groups. And by the way, I will go out of my way to say that when you say that something is George Soros linked or related to one of his organizations, that is not an anti-Semitic slur in any way. George Soros has basically lived his life to demonize Israel and almost any cause that anyone would think would be pro-Jewish. So criticizing George Soros is not anti-Semitic. That's number one. Two things
and you're Jewish.
And I am Jewish. That's actually, and that's still irrelevant relative to being able to criticize George Soros.
And I'm a better Jew than George Soros.
You are a better Jew than George Soros. I know you've said it before.
I'm willing to debate him. I'm willing to debate him on that. I think I even know more of the Talmud than he does.
but it's funny because I remember when you said that a couple months ago, and and the outrage machine started attacking you, and it's such nonsense because when you said that, I know what you mean by that, and certainly every New York Jew knows what you mean by that. That there's a spirit, a New York spirit, really is what you meant by that. And that you obviously have, and I certainly think most Jews probably think you're an honorary Jew. But putting that aside, there's two things going on with these autonomous zones and what these people want. Now, look, the mayor of Seattle In effect, she's saying, hey, you can do whatever you want in my city, and we're going to allow you to do it. There are going to be no rules. I know exactly who to negotiate with, which is what you're saying is the important part of controlling some of this stuff. But it's even worse than that, because then when the president tweeted about the autonomous zone in Seattle, she tweeted back at him saying, in effect, everything's fine here, mind your own business. And it's like, I have friends in Seattle. They don't think everything's fine right now. There is a part of a city that in effect is being run by, what either you can call it a bunch of gangsters or whatever you want to call it. That's what they are. There is a lawless part of the city. So that's number one. And number two, what we have to understand is this really is by design. Who's in charge of this thing? It's very unclear. And I think they're designing it to be unclear so that it can spread everywhere. It's obviously not particularly spontaneous when they're going around toppling every monument. And where are the lefties? I mean, we talked about this on the radio last week. But where are the good, decent liberals who are supposed to stand up to this stuff? They're gone. They really are gone. And it pains me to say that as what I would consider myself to be a good New York old school liberal, which I think in many ways now is just a modern conservative. But there are no adults in the room on the Democratic side. It doesn't mean that the right and conservatives and Republicans are right about everything, but there is a rich there's a rich ability to debate on the right that has been decimated on the left. And look, you saw this last week with the New York Times when Tom Cotton wrote that piece. And what happened? There was an insurrection at the New York Times, and now they're firing people who are old school journalists. So we're watching this thing spread across every institution.
It's now time to take a short break, and we'll be back with Dave Rubin in a moment. Welcome back to our discussion with Dave Rubin. Well, Dave, I have to tell you, one of the reasons that I admire you very, very much, and from the very beginning, when I started hearing you and reading about you, is you're one of the few people who remembers that. Or I'm sure a lot of people remember it, but it's in the forefront of their minds, because I also was a Democrat, probably a libertarian type Democrat. I always hated their foreign policy, always thought they were too weak. I liked their domestic policy, social programs, I liked that. But I also liked the classic idea of liberalism, which the Supreme Court, I've forgotten the justice now, used to say your real adherence to the First Amendment. It's not when you allow the people who agree with you to speak. It's when you protect with your life the people who disagree with you. To me, that's America. To me, that's understanding. That's what makes us different than everybody else. Everybody else allows protests if they're protesting how the dictator's wonderful. Right? But minute they say down with the dictator, or the dictator has too many bananas, all of a sudden they get in prison. Well, that's where we are now. That's where, Condoleezza Rice wants to speak at Boston College, and they won't let her go to Boston College. That was a while back. When that started, I started to see the left has turned. That could never have happened. If that had happened when you go back, the leftists would have been out there demonstrating.
Yep.
They've been demonstrating more than the rightists that she should be allowed to speak.
Well, that's why these things are cyclical. So you're totally right. The Berkeley free speech movement, these were lefties that were protesting for free speech. And these things come and go. So let's not forget, 20 years ago, there were people on the right, say Joe Lieberman and John McCain, who were, wanted to ban violence in video games, and they wanted to get Mortal Kombat out of stores. So it's not that one side has a complete monopoly on what's right. But as it stands in 2020 right now, you can basically debate anything with someone on the right, and they're not going to try to take away your job. They're not going to try to deplatform you or destroy you. For example, in my book, I lay out what I call a begrudging pro-choice position. I completely accept that it's life when the sperm meets the egg, and we don't have to get into all the science of it.
We sort of come to the same conclusion after 40 years of analysis, including my own having once wanted to be a priest, so it gets very theologically confused too. But I come to pretty much the same analysis you do.
Absolutely. So look, in my book, I lay out a 12-week cutoff, and I know for the person that is fully trying to protect life, I understand that that's an arbitrary cutoff. I do too. And right. So your position on this is what I think is the sort of new right position. It doesn't mean that you, Mayor Giuliani, are trying to convince every pro-life Christian that they should be more pro-choice. But there's obviously a spot for people like us carved out on the right to agree to disagree with these people. Now, try to have that position on the left where you say 12-week abortion, which used to be a commonly held, or 20-week even, right? 20 weeks. If you try to have that position as someone on the left, they'll tell you that you hate women and that you're an anti-abortion nut job and the rest of it. So what the left in effect is doing is, if you don't tick off these 10 things that they want you to prescribe to the second they get there, you got to do it the second they get there, they'll kick you out. What I see happening on the right is more of an opening for that. And I would say the more the right can do it begrudgingly on pro-choice, the wider that tent will be. Because I just firmly believe that the future of American politics, if we're to remain a nation that's anything close to the country that we love, the future will be a center-right future. The left has given up or not given up. The left has basically destroyed every decent tenet that they used to hold. And the right, it's now incumbent on the right to save this thing.
I think that's right. I think the best outcome for this election would be a big defeat for the Democrats. The Republican Party probably accomplishing a lot of what they want to accomplish. Maybe even the Republican Party going a little too far, because when parties take over, they sometimes go a little too far. And that'd be an opening for the Democratic Party to reform itself, to kind of do maybe a more legitimate version of what they did in the 80s when they had the New Democrats, from which Gore and Clinton, and even though Clinton was a lot of problems, compared to now, he was a moderate Democrat. His wife had the left tendency, but I don't even know if he was a moderate. He was a pragmatic politician. Lincoln, he knew how to make deals. Mm-hmm. If he had to give up 3 things to get 5, he'd give up 3 things to get 5. I'll tell you, the biggest deal I was involved with him was the crime bill, the now infamous crime bill. And the biggest proponents of more police in the crime bill were Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer. Mm-hmm. And to watch the two of them squirm away from it is actually deeper than politics. It's to watch 2 men lose whatever integrity I thought they had.
Well, that's why, yeah, I'm with you on that. Look, that's why Joe Biden is so dangerous in a weird way. Now, first off, he's obviously having cognitive problems. I don't mean that to be glib or sarcastic or take any joy in that. It's just obvious. And the media won't touch it. And yet the day that it leaks out that they've known about it, everyone in the media is going to say, oh, I wanted to talk about it, but the editors wouldn't let me, or something like that. But Biden, who is now running against, even on abortion, he's running against himself. He's running against himself on crime. He's running against himself on all these things. You may have seen at the LGBT Equality Forum where he said that if you're going to prison, it shouldn't be what sex your birth certificate says. It should be whatever gender you identify with. Well, we're going to have an awful lot of male rapists in female prisons. I mean, all of these things are counter to logic and reason, which used to be, as you said before, liberal principles. So Biden, to me, is sort of the last sort of stop between full leftist insanity. And he obviously isn't the guy that can stop this thing. So I agree with you on this. The only way we get out of this and get a sane left back, which, by the way, people on the right, conservatives should want a sane left, because you want some healthy tension in a society, right? So the only way you get to that is that Trump, I think, has to win in a landslide, thus finally causing whatever adults are left in the Democratic Party. I don't know who they are anymore, but there's got to be a couple blue dog Democrats left who can finally say, look what the progressives wrought upon us. They destroyed our party. They tried to insert terrible ideas of identity politics and socialism. And out of that, perhaps a phoenix could rise. And then congratulations. Well, then we can reset and we have, a Republican Party that has power and a Democratic Party that maybe can be sane again. And I think that would set us back on a track that would make sense for most people.
Well, Dave, you know what I think would be interesting to everyone, and it certainly is to me, a bit of your personal journey. How
Sure.
you went, I mean, there's the old Churchill saying, if you're not a liberal when you're 20, you don't have a heart, and if you're not a conservative by the time you're 40, you don't have a brain.
Yeah.
And I use that a lot when I explain my own. Well, you were once a Democrat. and then I use that as an example. But I know many people, maybe because they joined me because I was a Democrat once, who made this change. Many. And I'd just like to see how it happened. Sometimes it's over a period of time, and sometimes it's almost like a St. Paul moment. You know, Jesus appears to you and says, "You're converting. You're killing my people."
Yeah, there were a couple moments. You know, I quote that Churchill quote often, and then of course there's the other one by Ronald Reagan, which is, "I didn't leave the Democratic Party; the Democratic Party left me."
True. I believe that's true.
Yeah. It's the same thing. If the Democrats were the Democrats of old, I mentioned this to you on the radio as someone that grew up in New York. You know, Ed Koch, you know, before you, JFK obviously, and he's before my time, but ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And then Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was our great senator in New York, who I actually got to meet in a social studies class when I was about 12 years old.
He was a great friend of mine.
I remember he walked around. He had a little pocket constitution, and he was extremely tall, and he talked about freedom and liberty and all of these things as a liberal. So for me, as coming from a New York liberal position, I always believed, you know, every holiday, I talk about this in the book, every holiday that my family ever had, it was all the adults sitting at one table, all the kids at one table, and I was always trying to get to the adult table because they were arguing about everything under the sun, every political thing you could think of, from abortion to foreign policy to whatever the top, you know, the stuff of the day was. I'm sure they argued about policies in New York City. You know, I should mention to you, by the way, that I've had living in New York City since around 1908. We were able to trace it back to. And over the years, you know, the American dream, of course, is that you move to the suburbs. But my sister and her husband and 2 kids just moved out of New York City because of the craziness right now. And we only have one family member left in New York City, which is very, very sad for me, actually, because how much I love New York City. But there's just such, I don't have to tell you, there's just such chaos there. But as for the direct answer to your question, there were a couple moments that really woke me up that I describe in the book. I'll give you one of them. It was very much laced with identity politics. So you may know David Webb, the conservative radio host on Sirius XM, who happens to be black. And I say happens to be black because I don't like describing people as black.
He and his wife are also close friends of ours.
Oh, great. I love David. We're friends with him too.
Me too.
All right. We'll all do dinner sometime.
Please. He's great.
So I was on Sirius XM years ago, and I was a big lefty at the time, and David was on the right on the Patriot channel. We met in the hallway one day. We started chatting, and then I started going on his show every week, and I would argue the liberal positions, and he would argue the conservative positions. We never got angry at each other, and at the end, we'd go downstairs to Del Fresco's, and we'd have a steak and some whiskey, and we were good. Years later, this is about 5 years ago now, I was on the Young Turks Network, which is a far-left YouTube channel, and I was a progressive in the whole thing. And they were showing a clip of Fox News, and David Webb was the guy, I think he was sitting in for Hannity that night, and they're showing a clip of him, and he's talking about, you know, some standard conservative talking points. And I'm looking at my co-host, and they're all talking about this Uncle Tom black man, this sellout, this grifter, you know, he hates himself, he's doing it for the money, all of these things. And I'm watching these supposed tolerant, open-minded liberals say this about a black man just because he thought differently than they wanted black men to think or black people to think.
Right.
And suddenly, so when you talk about the Jesus moment, in that way it was because the light went off because I know him. It's not like they were just talking about a guy.
They were talking about David? They were talking about David?
They were talking about
Oh,
David
my goodness.
Webb. They were talking about David Webb. He was on Fox News, and they're watching this clip of him going on. He's a sellout, a grifter, and they didn't realize that I knew him. And then because it suddenly struck me, thought, you know, we think of racism as, oh, you don't want these people to use the same water fountain, or you don't want these people to have jobs. But the left has imported a new pernicious racism, which is that if you are of a certain color, that means that you should think a certain way. And what I realized was that these were the new racists. And that really was one of the 3 moments that really got me, because I knew and know him, and I know he's a good man who believes in what he talks about.
Yeah, that's really a very good point. It's like when Biden just very quickly said, well, if you're not going to vote for me, you're not black. And of course, the man is black. That is a racist. How can you define for someone else their race? And the man is clearly black. You can't tell him he's not black. What are you, excommunicating him?
But that's the thing. People don't think of that because it doesn't seem like overt racism, right? It doesn't seem like something obvious. You can't do this because you're black. But in many ways, it's as I said, it's pernicious. It's insidious, is what I would say, because it sort of sounds right. Oh, black people must be Democrats because Democrats care about black people. But then all you have to do is think about it for about 5 seconds. And if we what cities are burning, what cities have the most shootings and the biggest problems with police, they're all Democratic-run cities. What was going on in New York City before the man I'm talking to right now took over? I remember I used to go visit my grandma who lived on 66th and Central Park West, and I would want to go down to Times Square, and my mom would never let us walk down there.
Absolutely.
And then that was David Dinkins, who was a progressive, and then you took over and you cleaned up the place. These things are not coincidences. So when they're all blaming Trump for what's happening in Minneapolis, what's happening in Ferguson, what's happening in Atlanta, in New York City, and in LA, they're all run by lefties. I mean, the media refuses to touch this.
Yeah, yep. You know, I think of the process that they go through when they do the Uncle Tom, or you can't be a black if you support Trump or the Republicans. I think it's dehumanizing.
Oh, of course it is.
It is basically saying you're too stupid to have your own ideas. Therefore, you have to have our ideas, and that'll make you intelligent, and that'll make you acceptable. I mean, when is it in the history of democracy has one person been able to tell 2 million people they must all think the same thing?
Of course. Well, look, this is the essence of what collectivism is. And collectivism is basically the worst time-tested idea of all time. I mean, you may remember this, that right before the election, when Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire, the co-founder of PayPal.
Oh, very controversial. I remember. Yes.
When he announced that he was going to support Trump, the Ad magazine, which is supposedly the magazine, Peter Thiel happens to be gay. They ran a piece saying that Peter Thiel is not gay. Yes, he does have sex with people of the same sex, but that in and of itself is not gay, because what really is gay is a mindset. I mean, that in many ways is the most anti-gay thing you could possibly say.
Here's what they misread about the gay situation in the Republican Party. It wasn't civil rights. It didn't have the same jarring effect because it wasn't followed by busing, enforced integration, tactics that immediately they had to accept a new way of life and immediately was forced on them, and then they overreacted in a terrible way. I think gay rights was handled beautifully from the time of Stonewall for 20, 25 years, and people were softened up for it. By the time we got to it, there were just a few hardheads left. I think if we ever have to do something like that again, that's the better way to do that. I know the Young Turks say they have to accept it right away. But you realize if somebody's living a life for 50 years, even very smart people and open people, maybe you got to give them a 3 or 4 year orientation, and then they're going to accept it.
I completely agree, because otherwise it's anti-human. You can't expect just because you change one day that everyone else is going to change one day. And by the way, to your point, Republicans right now, I'm not saying there aren't some,
of course there are.
Some, let's say, anti-gay or not gay marriage. I don't even think that necessarily makes you anti-gay, but with a biblical view of marriage. I'm friends with Ben Shapiro. I'm sure you know who he is. Yes. He's an Orthodox Jew, biblical definition of marriage, but he's not trying to stop gay people from getting married. That's his personal view. That's a more libertarian approach that I can. But if you think about it this way, the biggest voices who were against gay marriage, say 10 years ago, Republican Party, actually influence at all in the Republican Party right now. So your point is that the Republicans Democrats had any sort of sane thought left, they would say, hey, we did get a win here. Let's be gracious about it, not let's just consistently try to continue to paint them all as bigots and racists and haters and the rest of it.
Well, it's been a terrific conversation. Just one last thing. How do you see the race right now?
First off, I'm not convinced that Biden is going to be the nominee. I think that they still may pull something. And even if he is the nominee, if you're a Democrat, you have to know you're not voting for Joe Biden. You're voting for whoever the DNC puts as the VP. So in many anyways, the entire nomination process, I think, is going to be looked back at years from now as just a complete sham. Because which, by the way, it would be incredibly dangerous. Everyone's saying Kamala Harris right now. I mean, she is an authoritarian of the worst order and would not care about due process or anything else. So I'm not convinced it'll be Biden. But either way, regardless of who it is, I think short of another absolute economic that, there's another lockdown and something like that. I think most people think that Trump cares about this country. I think that he's trying to keep the wheels on. And when you see the anarchists, if the choice is people that sort of play with the anarchists or Trump, who maybe, some people have an aversion to the way he tweets or speaks, but I think they basically think he likes America, I think Trump wins a Reagan real.
Well, I think this has been an interesting discussion. I'd love to follow it up on how we solve it. And we can do it on my podcast or yours.
You're coming on my podcast, so we'll pick it up there.
I'd love to talk about what is it. How do we fix this? I mean, it shouldn't be this way. Thank you very, very much, and thank you for being really one of the first to put the issue in this way. You really framed it in a way that I think can be very useful. Thank you very much, Dave.
Appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Congratulations. This is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with you for an episode of Rudy's Common Sense. And today we have with us someone who is going to be critical to what America is like in the next 4 years, Brad Parscale. Brad is the campaign manager of Donald Trump. I think everyone knows who he is. So let's go right to the interview, Brad. So how do you compare this to the prior campaign? I mean, a lot of people think you're new to politics. Of course, that's ridiculous. You got your feet wet big time. You were like thrown in the ocean in 2015, 2016. I remember when you were thrown in the ocean, you learned how to swim, you learned how to be an Olympic swimmer, and you're one of the people that won the election for him in 2016. So how does that now change, particularly with he's lost one of his great assets, the ability to have those tremendous rallies. Hopefully they're coming back now, but we lost 2 months of those.
Yeah, well, first of all, Mayor, thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to be on with you. I remember sitting on the plane with you back in 2016. That was kind of fun. We'd sit around, me, you, a few others that are, some are still around, some aren't, and the president. And I've been doing this straight now for 5 straight years now. It's almost, by the time this is over, 6 straight years. I don't think few people have more experience running a campaign now. I've been doing it every day for years. Most people do it for a couple hundred days. I've been doing it for a couple thousand days. So it's one of those kind of things. But yes, the rallies are significant to our return. We went virtual during the COVID, pandemic. We had to turn to a virtual campaign. We were very well built for that. We're a very digital forward campaign. But nothing like having President Trump on the road. The amount of data we collect on the road, the president's message that gets cut up into clips to become on TV. Right now, you have a very one-sided approach from the media, which I'm sure you see, because the president's not out there as much speaking. So this Saturday, we're going to have at least probably 100,000 people descending on Tulsa, and that's going to be a big deal. It's going to bring a lot of media. It's going to bring a lot of great visuals, and it's going to allow the president to finally speak and start to have a contrast message against Joe Biden, who is bunkered down in his basement, because if he goes out and speaks, no one's going to understand what he's saying.
Of course, you're criticized for bringing them all together because of the COVID risk. But of course, they don't mention the thousands and thousands and thousands of protesters who were arm in arm, almost lip to lip, for days and days. But that was scientifically okay for them to do.
Well, it's a couple of big differences. I mean, we're actually going to do temperature checks. We're actually going to hand out masks. We're going to hand out hand sanitizer. We're doing a lot of things to help.
You didn't see Antifa doing that during the protest?
Yeah, they didn't do any of that. They're out there holding.
I saw them when they were checking temperatures, so they were very careful.
Yeah, no, it's never happened. We're gonna provide a lot of stuff. And by the way, that's above and beyond what even Oklahoma right now has. Oklahoma has a very low case rate. they're trying to do everything. Last night they filed a lawsuit which has already been thrown out. They were trying to do everything they can to try to stop this, and we're not going to allow that to happen because they know if President Trump gets back out with the American people, starts getting back on the road, they're in trouble because their candidate. We get more people in tents outside our rallies than they can get in their rally.
Now, one of the critical issues in 16 that people didn't realize until after the election is the tremendous amount of data collection that you were doing, oh gosh, starting almost from the beginning of his rallies.
Yeah.
And when you say the rallies are a gold mine of information, in addition to everything else, you mean for your data operation, that's a tremendous amount of information. And can you explain in a way where you don't give it away any secrets to the public how it works, what you do? Because it's fascinating.
You were one of the first people. I remember actually, Mr. Mayor, you were one of the first people I was explaining this to on the plane back in 2016, late 2015, and I was explaining like how we built an operation. The president had such high demand. We understood that there was a give take there, that people were willing to give up their information because how much the demand and just visceral feeling they had towards the president. We needed to understand what was happening. There were so many people with low propensity turnout. One of the most amazing things is 25% of the people that show up for Trump rallies haven't voted, but maybe once in the last 20
even now
years.
with the ones.
Even now, I'm going to have a data later today or tomorrow, depending on when this podcast shows. But that are actually going to show even this million people that hundreds of thousands of people haven't shown up to vote. That data allows us to build models, and what that means is we can look at and find other Americans that look similar to these people. We are able to find them and see what is the type of person right now that is likely to show up that hasn't the last 20 years. And even what's funny is almost 10% didn't even show up in 2016. Now think about that number, 10%. That's a significant number that doesn't show up in polling because these currently aren't in the models to poll. The president is very underpolled. He is that way because large portions of the American population that have no voting history, who are very off the grid, feel very visceral around this president wanting to show up. Their enthusiasm out the world. I wouldn't be surprised if our enthusiasm is much more in the 70% than the current reported 60%.
What was it last time?
It was in the 40s. So
our enthusiasm in 16 was
higher now.
It's higher now
because you have a.
It feels that, Brad. It feels that way. I mean, I remember talking to you a lot in 16 because I was at every one of the rallies with him. I was with him 24 hours a day. And the first time I realized he was going to win was the first rally I went to, because it was in June. It was in June, and it was a rally like it was 2 weeks before the campaign. The people were bouncing off the walls. I've never seen that
rally
before.
Intensity, yes, our rally intensity now for the guy that built the original system to like log rallies and to get people to come to him. I've been in that position ever since the very first rally. We used to get 8,000, 10,000 signups. Now we get hundreds of thousands of signups. We used to have to, advertise. Now all we do is literally send an email out, notify the press, and the people come running. Right. We'll probably have a tent city of people waiting for Tulsa. The demand and the feeling people have to support this president, and I think, and in contrast, Joe Biden doesn't have that. Most polls show him having somewhere between 20 and 24% enthusiasm. They say they really want to go vote for him. Most people, they just don't have that intensity. So the question, during the middle of their COVID crisis, can they get a whole bunch of people that don't really like Joe Biden to show up and vote?
So is the intensity level between Biden and Trump even wider than between Hillary and Trump?
Yes, where I thought Hillary had a higher enthusiasm. There were a lot of, I believe, kind of mid-aged women who were excited to see a female president. That was a driver for them. We saw, usually only about a 15 to 20 point gap between the two. We're seeing gaps of 40 to 50% between the president and Joe Biden. It's almost twice.
Just intuitively, it would seem to me that Hillary had a certain number of supporters that were voting for her. They believed in her over all the years, the woman, the whatever. Biden basically is the guy who can beat Trump from their point of view. They're all voting for him because he's the one guy they think can beat Trump.
They want the vote to be a referendum.
I think they prefer somebody else. Somebody more of a candidate. But this is the best they got, and they're going to go with him.
Yeah. They were just looking for a rubber stamp for a referendum. That's all they wanted. Somebody that they could hide in the basement, wouldn't say anything, who's a nice guy, put him down the corner and let him hide. The problem is what they found is a candidate that can barely finish a sentence. And we see it time in and time out, and who has some other issues too. I mean, we haven't even gone down the path of some of the things, and you search the C-SPAN articles, archives, you find some very interesting things. This guy's got some creepy issues as well.
And now we'll take a short break. We're now going to resume our conversation with Brad Pascal. I think I can. I can't even say anything about it because I've investigated him so much. He probably is the most ethically challenged human being to run for president. The family, which is, he's been in politics all his life. He's never had what some people would call an honest job because they tease about politics and say it's not an honest job. It's not nice. But he's never had a real job where you make money. The brother became a multimillionaire. The other brother became a multimillionaire. His son, who bankrupted a business, unfortunately has drug problems, became a multimillionaire. And they got it off selling his oath of office. It's simple as that.
But you actually know, Mayor,
it's terrible.
The number one issue that people, the number one issue that people don't like in him, Mr. Mayor, it's actually that he would be over 80 years old when he's in president. Right. That is actually a lot of Americans and a lot of older Americans actually feel like, and after hearing him speak, think that I think 70% of Americans believe he needs to go through a dementia test. They actually think.
I'm glad you raised that because I think that's so cynical. You know, during the course of one of the things I did for the president, I was coming back from Washington. I sat with Henry Kissinger, and Henry's over 90, and Henry looks very old, and Henry has a hard time moving. And I sat down with Henry. We were delayed on the plane. We had a 3-hour conversation. He's more lucid than most of the 20-year-olds I know. So there are people who can be 80 and 90, and they're sharp as a tack. My God, I know some of them. And there can be people who are 50 who are afflicted by it.
Yes.
This is such a phony thing. The other day, the president was walking down the ramp carefully, because if he didn't, he would have broken his leg. Then immediately he began walking normally. And all the Democrats are saying he needs a health test. Meanwhile, Biden is showing 8 out of the 10 factors for dementia. Every day he's on.
He is. Well, people have missed the president. The 2 videos they showed yesterday were very disingenuous towards the president. One is the president actually wears true leather bottom shoes because he's got good style. Right. And so you can't walk down a wet metal thing. You'll slip and
imagine
fall.
if that happened.
And number 2, he always drinks water when he has a tie on with 2 hands because he's very careful. He does not like to get spots on his tie. He's very buttoned up with his dress, and he's very careful about that stuff. So he always drinks water and tips a little bit slowly so the water doesn't run out each side. And I've seen him do that for 10 years of working for him.
I know him for 30 years. I think he has more energy now than he had 30 years ago. And
I actually told him that also. I actually think right now, I think how hard he's worked over 4 years and how many issues he's dealt with, he's become even sharper in understanding and quicker at getting even better at results that he does. I'm in meetings with him every day, and he is on me now like white on rice right now. And I think he's sharp.
So what are the main issues that his supporters should focus on? Because those are the people who be listening to us. What are the main issues they should be focusing on to talk to their neighbors and try to invigorate people to take part in this election?
Well, I think there's a few issues. I mean, first of all, the president is much more in a position to kind of bring back the economy. I think we see the numbers yesterday. We already see some of the retail numbers. American people want jobs. They want to get back to work. We are a country of people who would like to work, who want to be successful, who believe in the American dream. And the president is in a much better position to rebuild the economy. I also think that, the president he has a lot of issues with the law and order and safety, and I believe the American people are over this. I think we're going to see states like Minnesota now become available and become opportunity states now for us. Because I think as one person, especially you, Mayor, this president believes in law and order, supporting the police. A majority of people do not believe in this abolish the police movement. They say defund. They want to get rid of the police. They want anarchy. Look at Seattle. Look at these places. And I think the president is going to be a president that says that's something we can't accept for this country.
And the most amazing thing that I saw with Senator Scott, he has brought about reform of this whole area of police brutality that no Democrat's been able to do in 30 years. I mean,
Yes.
the agreements that he reached with Senator Scott, and I've been in law enforcement for 20 years of my life. I've been supportive of these things for 20 years of my life, and they've been blocked largely by Democrats. Clinton wouldn't do it. Obama wouldn't do it. And they're basic common sense things. Have a tracking program for cops that are bad cops. We all know most cops are wonderful. There are a couple of bad apples. If we can find the bad apples in advance, we solve the problem. You guys now have the technology to help us do that. I mean,
Yes.
technological geniuses like you, Brett. And law enforcement needs to use those people. And they do. We use it to track criminals, so now we should use it to figure who are the bad guys. Let's get them in advance and let's get them out.
Yeah. Well, if the media was honest, they would actually see how much the president's done for Black Americans
Oh.
compared to Joe Biden. And things like this. I actually believe one of the big things of this election is going to be the president stands for school choice, for the opportunity for young Black Americans to go to schools of their choice, to pick themselves up and to get a better education. And Joe Biden is completely against that. He wants Black Americans in these towns that have horribly run school systems in some areas because of the Democratic infrastructure that's been there, do not have a choice. He's also pushed for more HBCU funding. He continues to bring opportunity zones, continues to do so many things for Black Americans that led to some of the lowest unemployment in history. And he's going to do it again for the Black community.
Now, how about the convention? How is that going to work out? And I mean, I love conventions. I'm so glad we're going to have one, but I know the criticism we're going to take for it also.
Yeah, well, the governor in North Carolina just really, I mean, I think he's kind of messed up his reelection efforts. I think what he did was just was devastating. He removed $100 million of economy from the Charlotte area, and the business people in the community there should be upset. But, you know, Governor DeSantis in Florida was welcomed us with open arms. We have repositioned that for Jacksonville and northeast Florida. The community there is, and the mayor has said, we're open for business. We're going to see a good convention. We're going to see lots of people there. We're going to see a great speech from the president. It might be a little bit different. It might be a change, but for the most part, to the viewing public, there's not going to appear to be much difference.
You know, the governor of North Carolina has just accepted in place of the convention a large Antifa Black Lives Matter protest, because you don't get COVID. You don't get COVID when you see there's an immunity from COVID.
Well, it's also, instead of bringing money to the community, they'll burn and destroy businesses and ruin the economy. So that's your Democrat governor there in North Carolina's logic. Let's destroy business instead of building business.
Now, do you see focusing a good deal on something that, of course, the media doesn't bring out? Almost all of these riots, the protests, which we have no problem with, but the ones that became riots, every single one is a Democratic mayor who was holding the police back. I mean, you have hundreds of yards of footage of stores being looted, liquor being stolen, furs being stolen, jewelry being stolen, and the police are standing there like this. Just standing there watching. The poor men were held back by the mayor, by the Democratic progressive mayor.
Well, Mayor, this goes back to our actual ultimate fight, the media. The media does not portray that. They blame it on President Trump. They do things because they want to pass the buck. If you look at Minnesota, you had in Minneapolis, you had a Democratic mayor, Democratic police chief, Democratic AG, Democratic governor, and all of a sudden they go, oh no, look, it's Mr. Trump's fault. You know, and I think that just goes to the hypocrisy we see on the left. I think it goes, we see the complete bias from the media. And what's funny now, Mr. Mayor, when we used to sit around on the airplane back in 2016, they tried to hide it back then. The New York Times like, oh no, we're fair. Now they just explicitly just say, you know what, we don't like you, we're against you.
Yes.
Who cares?
Yes.
And that's the change.
Absolutely true.
They just, if we ever did one thing, we finally made them admit that they're complete bias hypocrites.
Are we ready for another whatever they're going to do to us? I mean, I'm half convinced that these things are, if not designed to hurt him, they're exaggerated to hurt him.
I'll tell you, Mayor, you know me. I'm not going to sit around and just accept the media's victory.
That.
So we've spent the last 3 years building some new technology we have not revealed yet. I'm not going to reveal it here because it's a secret, but next time I see you alone, I'll talk to you about it. But we have a way, we're going to converse with 100 million Americans that we need to get out to vote directly, without the media in the middle, without social media in the middle. We have a way to do that that's been unprecedented in American history. And when we turn that engine on, we're going to be able to deliver votes and bring a GOTV, get out the vote effort that's never been seen in American history. Because I understand the media is going to do everything they can, from suppression polls to everything else they can, to try to convince our people not to get out a vote. And there's over 100 million Americans that love this president, that can get out to vote, and we don't need all of them to show up. But if all of them do, we're going to see one of the biggest landslide victories in American history. And so the president did something very amazing, which a lot of Americans don't get. The day after he won the election, he knew that it wasn't the end of his fight. He knew it was the beginning of the fight. So he started his 2020 campaign the day after his inauguration. He wanted every single moment to be building towards that fight.
You should make the point that I don't think people know. The campaign never stopped.
Never stopped, because the president knew the media wouldn't stop.
Yeah, no honeymoon for Donald Trump, right?
Nope, never one day.
Well, I got to tell you two things from the ardent Trump supporters, his friends, people who love him. I'm going to tell you two things they're very, very happy about. They are, a lot of them are businessmen. They saw you hit with the unknown, meaning the shutdown of the country. And the campaign seemed to, within a day, react to it. And they kept getting notices, they kept getting information, they kept getting involved in virtual conferences. You and your team get a lot of credit for that. We didn't lose momentum during that period of time.
We picked up 350,000 volunteers during the COVID crisis while at home. We continued to get millions of viewers every night. We pretty much started our own online TV show. We needed to continue to communicate because the media thought the COVID opportunity was a time to finally shut Trump out, shut us down, shut down the voices from the right, and control the message explicitly, because they are who knows how to save us. And I think that's going to be proven. And I think in the future, not that the virus was fake, but the way they handled it was about their control and not about our safety. And I continue to think that.
What you did was you increased the media presence, the social media presence, and you improved it. You took it up to a higher quality, so it drew people's attention. But the main thing that a lot of people, maybe they don't remember because they weren't in the campaign, the main thing you did in 16 was the last 3 weeks of the campaign, figuring out where to go.
Moving the money.
That really changed the election. Go to Wisconsin instead of Minnesota. Better chance to move Michigan than Minnesota. I remember the last night of the campaign, we made a little trip to New Hampshire because we thought we had a chance to flip one vote. We came, a couple hundred votes away from doing it. And that was a good move.
If it wasn't for Ayotte, I think we would have won it. Without Ayotte being up there running.
I thought we had it. When we left, I thought we had it, and you made a call to him, and they wanted him in Michigan. It was 11:30 at night. We showed up in Michigan on Election Day, 1 o'clock in the morning. Thousands of people waiting for him. He would have, if you called him again, he would have gone to 2 more. I mean, he would have stopped at 3 in the morning and 6 in the morning also. He was still up.
He'll do it again too. He'll do it again this time. He's already telling me he wants to do 4 or 5 rallies a day. And if I were a Democrat candidate like Joe Biden, I would be scared to death, this guy. Because once we get on the road and we start hitting all of these swing states, even if this thing is close, which I don't think it will be by then, the president's sheer ability to bring out the vote. Look what he's done in some elections. Look at Ohio's governor election. He was down 10. Within the president going to visit and doing anything, he wins by 8. 18-point changes. You can see it state after state, place after place. When the president shows his presence on a local media and a local DMA, the turnout just skyrockets. And when we're across this country, because remember, this campaign right now, Mr. Mayor, has more money in the bank than we spent in the entire 2016 campaign.
Wow. Well, I'm going to tell you one last piece of advice. Let him always think he's behind. He's much better from behind. Whatever. If he's ahead by 10 points, put him behind by 3. Save the 10 points. I like him. Always liked him better behind. People don't realize it. When he gets one of those 10 or 15% polls, all he starts thinking about is, how am I going to change it? And it creates the creative juices. He really is there are boxers like that. I mean, there are great boxers.
I can't wait to see him Saturday.
They take a couple of punches and they come back. He definitely is a counterpuncher. He could be the most charismatic politician of our times. And you and he have changed campaigning. You've changed campaigning.
I think he's going to be one of, yes, he did. We have changed, the president through and his team, and with the leadership of Jared Kushner and the president and others, have literally changed the way politics works, the way campaigning
100%.
works. And I believe he is the most popular president in American history. He has by far the most visceral experience that's ever occurred. And let's just take, for example, Saturday, 1 million Americans signing up, 100,000 descending in Tulsa, in Oklahoma. These things don't happen to other politicians. Nothing against Bush or nothing against, Clinton and these people, but they didn't have 100,000 people descending on Tulsa, Oklahoma when they showed up. They got a couple thousand people, rah, go home, and got a little bit of TV time. This president already has people camped out. It's wall-to-wall TV coverage for him in the entire Midwest, from Texas to Kansas to Arkansas, and you just have not seen this in American history.
It's also by far the most transparent president, which is why I think they become so close to him. He communicates with them constantly. And then we're being asked to go back to a Biden who's hiding in a basement. I mean, Obama once went 13 months without a press conference. Biden may never have one. Biden may never have a press conference.
Yes. Well, he's already I think it's 75 days today or something like that. Look, Biden, all he does is make canned statements written from political, people around him. And anytime he goes off the cuff, you saw on his last stage with the mask hanging off him, he actually told the public that he's boring himself and that he doesn't know what to say next. And that should scare the crap out of every American.
And every police officer in America is saying, you told us to shoot to wound people. Did you ever consider, Joe, if we wound them, they kill us? We're shooting at them because they're pointing a gun at us. We're going to shoot to wound them so they can kill us and our partner. Joe, it's over for you. You're too old and you should go retire.
Biden's so weak, if he won office, he would be a complete puppet of the far left, and the policy changes would take this country in a way we might not ever come back from. And every American that loves work, loves freedom, and loves the ability of the American dream should do nothing else but vote for President Trump.
Well, I think everyone that listens to this can have a lot of confidence that the president's got the right support. You really did a terrific job in 2016, and I know from watching on the inside, you're doing even a better job this time. And your people, you pick very good people, too.
Thank you. And I hope, Mayor, you come back on the road.
I will.
We got a little bigger plane. We got a bigger plane this time.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the McDonald's, the pizza,
McDonald's,
and the Chinese food.
Well, Air Force One. I will tell you the biggest change from 2016 to 2020, the meal improvements on Air Force One versus McDonald's and Pizza Hut. I couldn't eat any more chicken nuggets.
I didn't go on a trip for about a year after he became president. I went on a trip, and I actually told the two people I like that kind of food. So we're going to get great McDonald's, and we get this fancy food with the White House and the what. Of course, they stole all the White House.
After 100 days straight, though, 100 straight days of chicken nuggets wears you out. Like it'll change your life a little bit. But it was fun though, and I'm ready to go back on the road. And the greatest thing about going on the road with this president is he loves his country so much. He loves the people so much. He loves his fans so much. He makes it fun. So that much hard work is fun because we're out fighting for the American people. Who doesn't want to do that?
Well, good luck. You can call on me for anything, and I definitely have to make some of those trips.
Well,
okay?
I'm actually going to talk to you tomorrow,
right.
So I appreciate it. Right?
Take care, Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Take care. I believe that interview was very, very interesting. It really opened up a lot of things that I don't think people know about the inside of a campaign, and how Brad Pascal in 16 was one of the 3 or 4 critical players that elected the president by his use of statistics, his ability to tie those statistics to voter behavior, and his ability to make judgments about where the president should be. Where should he expend his energy in that last 3-4 weeks of the campaign, where a crucial error can cost you a state? You have a chance in Michigan, you have a chance in Minnesota. But where do you have the better chance if you can only go to one? Well, Michigan. So he put him in Michigan. That's based on 2 things. It's based on gathering statistics early and often during the campaign. In this case, he was gathering them last time for a year. Now he's been gathering them for 8 years, 7 years, 8 years. So it should be even a better and more refined base. And number 2, it also helps you know where people are inclined toward your themes for the purpose of advertising. So it's much more targeted to where you get the most out of your time and your money. and you get a much better understanding of people's profiles. Brad is excellent at that. The criticism he's received is he doesn't know politics. That's really a mistake. Brad learned politics in a crash course in 16, and now he's been at it for 4 straight years. Very, very few people, if any, that would have the ability to guide this campaign the way he has, both from the point of view of the science of statistics and then the art and science of politics. And I think having listened to him, all of you Trump supporters should feel pretty good that we've got the right guy at the top. But number 2, all you anti-Trumpers, start worrying. This is Rudy Giuliani. I'll be back with you with Rudy's Common Sense.
Please subscribe to our backup channels on YouTube: Inglorious Patriots, Net4 Truth USA 2 Patriot Channel, and Ethernet Warriors. You can also catch us on BitChute.com/Net4TruthUSA, remonetized.org/user/inglorious-patriots9, and drop.space/@Net4TruthUSA. All the links are in the description. We fly so close to the target, we are on our 5th fighter jet. We will be relentless and persistent until the enemies of freedom are defeated. You can support this channel by using the links in the description, but for a $100 donation, I will personally send you a autographed hardcover special edition copy of Land of Childhood's Fears. Also, visit my bookstore at lulu.com/Net4TruthUSA. If you are viewing this video on BitChute, you can use the links in the description to support us, or simply click the green $ dot on our video to support this channel. Thank you. Links are in the description section.